Okay, so yeah, just a little bit of an insight into what we've been doing with Causeway. Um, Basically, our digital team, myself and a couple of others, have been working alongside Causeway and our highways department to basically move over the kind of service inquiry type requests that we get through away from Flare and into Causeway system Alloy. Alloy is the operational asset management system. We have been using it as a council for street lighting inspections and things like that, but it wasn't getting used for anything else. So we kind of took that on and rolled with it from there. The aim of the project was basically to streamline the service inquiries that we were getting through, being received from customers, automate the inspections being created off the back of those service inquiries, and providing tracking and feedback to the users in a timely manner. Everyone knows things like care for your area, potholes, very high hitters, a lot of progress chasing for that. So it was to try and reduce that down a bit. Just a little quick view of the My Council there. We've got a couple of requests in, and I'll go through how these pop up and how they get updated. But for the service of highways, we looked at a number of different forms. I think we started off with 6 or 7, and then we've got a couple of forms that do partial Alloy, partial Flare still, because obviously it goes to different departments. So this is a list of ones that we've integrated so far. And as mentioned by Corinne earlier, we have worked quite closely with our IT team, Zentral, to help us with things like the APIs and endpoints to get this integration up and running. So I'll pop through a form for ourselves here. So as that is submitting, obviously the API and things like that are ticking away in the background and pushing the information through into Alloy. We've then got within that API and endpoint combo, as soon as it's submitted, it pulls back or asks Alloy for the case reference, and that's the unique reference number for the service inquiry that I've just submitted. You can see in My Council, because I've done it via My Council and I put my details in there, it's automatically shown, and we've just got a really brief status update that states report received. This is Alloy, nice little map view here, so I'll pop my reference number in and it takes me to that area and gives me the basic details that we've got going on. This does get, I think it has updated, it's partially updated there. There is a number of workflows that go on in Alloy in the background, so things like it'll allocate it to the most appropriate technician based on ward. It'll update things like risk score if it's applicable, and things like that. So once we've clicked send, it also triggers our workflow that we set up within the digital team. So I'll give you a little view of that. There it is. And this is repeated for a number of the different forms. Some have got variations on it depending on statuses and which is appropriate. So as I mentioned, it's a really brief initial status update there. And what that does in our workflow, setting that initial status, it gives Alloy a little bit of time to refresh and update, because the default status in Alloy when something first goes through is issued, but it doesn't update in those first few seconds. So if the customer comes in, there would be no status update immediately after. So we update that just to keep it on track. And have a look. And then the next part of the workflow runs our endpoint. Now, as I said, the endpoint picks up all the relevant fields that we've requested, so things like status, who it's allocated to, the times things have been completed, and things like that. We then have a little script action on there that uses the statuses input within Alloy. So Alloy has got the service inquiry, and we've also got attached, again through automation in Alloy with a workflow, an inspection, because everything's inspected by highways there, and depending on what's input on here and on our service inquiry has a knock-on effect to what we pick up and update in the My Council account. So as you can see in here, awful lot of text, but basically we pull through the various statuses in Alloy, which are quite short, a little bit abrupt, quite to the point, proposed, doesn't really give the customer an awful lot of information. So we then swap it round and update it with a much more user-friendly statement. So it gives them a bit more information, a bit more knowledge on where exactly their query is as it goes. And as you can see in here, they get updated. So this one, for example, we've got issues being investigated and is being monitored as part of our routine inspections. So that one's kind of done and dusted there. And what this does is every 24 hours, it basically does a loop. So it does a little check, updates the status, records it in history, and then we wait. So each day, the status will be updated depending on what the technicians have been doing until the technicians enter what we class as like a final status. So this is the outcome of the overall service inquiry. And again, it can be done on different parts within Alloy. So, for example, some have jobs associated, some only have inspections, but everything feeds back to the service inquiry via workflows in Alloy, updates, and sends. We pick that up via this endpoint. Once that final status is updated, we basically close down the record, the service inquiry. So obviously it saves our side of things. We don't have processes running forever. They are relatively quick in highways to get things up to date, but it also keeps the customer bang up to date as to where they need to be. So you can see that's been updated there as well. Let's have a look. So yeah, so that's once every 24 hours that gets updated. Finally, obviously not everybody has access or can use My Council, and a lot of customers are still pretty old school and still like to phone up. So we also developed using the same endpoint that's accessed in the process model for a lookup. So again, pulling through the exact same information and just formatting it essentially. So we'll pop that through for things submitted today. So if the customers do phone up, the CSO can pop in the customer's name, email address, the reference or part thereof the location, and bring back any of the results, hopefully narrow it down enough to find the customers in particular. And it calls the endpoint upon submission. So this is like a real-time update, not the 24-hour based one that the customer sees. And that just brings everything back. As I say, a little bit more specialised information because it is the CSOs that are used to this, so they can pick that up there. And we've got all sorts in here, everything we can possibly pick up. It can bring through technicians' notes, just a little bit more detail, and at the very end you can see this one's been closed with the outcome status and when that's been closed down for them.